Welcome to the Peter King Podcast, live from Green Bay. Only it isn't live when you see it. It's live when we're doing it right now. And then when you either see it or listen to it, it'll be either on tape or whatever they call tape in only words or only audio. So I don't know what that is. Anyway, we're here in Green Bay, and I'm joined by my good friend Kalyn Kahler. Now, for those who don't know Kalyn works for The Athletic. She covers the National Football League. She does some really good investigative work. She has recently reported on the Northwestern hazing scandal. She just does a fabulous job. And the reason that Kalyn is here today, it's because it's a little reunion because I formerly worked with Kalyn. She was a colleague at the MMQB, which was my website, my microsite as it was called, at Sports Illustrated. So I wanted Kalyn to come on to talk about some NFL stories that are percolating right now, to talk about the Green Bay Packers, because you were here today reporting on the Packers. But also, I think it's really, really important that we start off. Now I'm gonna hold this for a second because you are gonna tell a story in a minute. But first, I do want to tell what we're going to do on this podcast today. So we're going to have three guests as we go along in the show. Our first guest is going to be 2019 National Football League Most Valuable Player, Lamar Jackson. He will be joining us. I recorded this last week in Owings Mills, Maryland at Ravens training camp. Then we'll be joined by free agent signing tight end of the Atlanta Falcons, Jonnu Smith, reunited with Arthur Smith in Atlanta. And then finally, you're going to hear from Bryce Young, the first pick in the draft, the Carolina quarterback. We talked to him in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Interesting conversation. He's such a nice young man, and it's weird to say that for a guy who has the sort of all the hopes and dreams of an NFL franchise in his hands. But Bryce Young's still looking a little bit like he's 18 years old. But anyway, we'll talk to those three players a little bit later in the podcast. And then I'll give you a few thoughts going out about our trip and where we're going to be going in the next week before I join you next week from Denver with the podcast. So, Kalyn, I want to start off by you telling your favorite story about Peter King. Yeah. And your favorite story about Peter King came from one of these training camp trips to Atlanta, Georgia, a few years ago when you and I worked together at the MMQB. And you, I believe, were going to live stream our day on the training camp trip from Atlanta that day.
Yeah, we were big into social media back then. And Facebook Live had just been invented. So we were like, okay, we have to do a whole day of our training camp tour in our car, in the van, at the team stop, at dinner at Waffle House. I believe it started at Waffle House. When the day, after this event is when the day really began. So we were like, I told Peter the night before, I was very clear. I told you, we're going to be live the whole day. I said, when I knock on your hotel room door, I will already be live. This is very clear. The audience needs to know that I made this extremely clear to him. And so
I'm not so sure about that.
So I told him, I was like, and literally, so I knocked on his door, and I have a phone in my hand, like I'm clearly recording. So any sane person would look at me and know that I was recording. And he opened the door to his hotel room. It's like 6:30 in the morning, maybe like 6:45 at the latest. And he just opens the door and he looks like,
how did I look?
He looked terrible. He looked like so tired and like something had happened. And I was like, and I was, again, like the phone was in front of my face. And I was like trying to like make it clear, like I'm on camera, but I didn't want to say it. So I was like, good morning, Peter. Like, how are you? And he's like, I laundered my phone. And I was like, what? Or actually, I think what you said is, I don't have a phone anymore. I think that was the direct quote. And then I was like, what happened to it?
Then I said,
and then you said it.
Can I just repeat the line?
Yeah.
Here's how I said it. I laundered my phone.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It was like the most depressed tone of voice. And I was like, oh no, because at the time he keeps saying we were colleagues, but like I was his assistant at the time. I was like the lowest, I was like, just out of college, I was working for Peter. And so I knew that the whole rest of my day was going to be figuring out how to get him a new phone. And was it the first time I don't know. There was like 2 times I had to replace your phone, and then a third time when, this is my other favorite story. You'll remember this when I say it. He accidentally tweeted his phone number out.
I did that, yeah.
He meant to DM it to, I believe,
Stacey James, the PR guy of the
Which I don't
Patriots.
know why you were Twitter DMing him and not texting him.
I don't know.
And instead of DMing
I was
Stacey
doing
James,
900 things at once, and I made a mistake. Can you accept the fact I made a mistake?
And he tweeted it out, and he was trying to get Stephon Gilmore. I remember this like yesterday. You were like, when can I get Stephon Gilmore? And then you sent your phone number. And it was a tweet to everyone. So then he gets all these calls from people who got his phone number off of Twitter.
I got 2,200 phone calls. That was the night I was writing my column. That was a Sunday night.
It was like a playoff
by
night.
Like, yeah,
it was like
by
a
like
game.
4:30 in the morning.
AFC Championship, probably.
I looked at the thing. I had missed 2,200 and something phone calls.
So then the next day, I don't even know how I did it this time, but I had to figure out how to get him a new phone number. And yeah, so that was an adventure.
Yeah, that was bad. But anyway, it seemed to work out. And the good thing is, you're still alive. I didn't kill you on any of these trips or on any of the misadventures that we had.
Right.
And
we can laugh about that now.
I don't think so.
And we laughed at the time as well. So
But I will just say this. I'm incredibly proud of what you have done.
Thank you.
You've really done great work. And I think the thing that I admire about you most is that you are dogged and you do not take no if you don't want to hear no. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to take no, but you're very, very good at figuring a way to get to yes. Mm-hmm. And what I like about that is that, look, one of the reasons why you came to work for us, you were one of 3 applicants for the job, and the other 2 editors at the website, Mark Moravik and Matt Gagne, said, we got to hire Kalyn. I said, but the other 2 writers who have applied for this job are really more accomplished, or were more accomplished in college than Kalyn. Why Kalyn? And so Mark basically said, she's just going to get the job done, Yeah. And so anyway, glad to have you on the podcast. Let's talk about 2 or 3 topics. So you and I were at the Packers today.
Yes.
And I'm going to end up writing next week in my column about Jordan Love. And Jordan Love seems like a very, very nice guy, very careful guy. And he's had an in and out training camp, I would say. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that Matt LaFleur is depressed or think he's not going to make it or anything like that. But tell me what you've learned about this young quarterback, Jordan Love, stepping into huge shoes, and how you think he's going to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. It has been up and down, and today's practice in particular just showed that, because the offense in team period with Love with the starters, he threw an interception on his first play of team period. So that obviously was not a great start. And Jair Alexander, the corner, he didn't make the interception. I believe it was Darnell Savage who made it. But Jair started chirping at the offense, saying things like, let's go, challenging them basically. And I talked to Jair after, and he was like, I didn't like how our offense started. They started out really flat, and that's not okay. Like, I will not accept that. And so he was chirping at them to sort of like get them back into it. And by the end of practice, by the next team period, they finished with 2 touchdowns. Jordan Love did. So that was much better. But I do think I don't know what to think about him quite yet. I think we need to see him, and I don't know what their plan is for if he's going to get any preseason action. I'm sure he won't get significant preseason action, but I don't know that we can really make any judgments at this point. But Jair, I asked him what should we know about Jordan? Like, we don't really know anything about Jordan. What should we know about him? And even some of the reporters here were like, just chatting with them off to the side, they were like, yeah, we don't really know what to make of him yet as a person, not even as a player. They're like, we didn't really talk to him much as a backup. Like, I'm not sure what his personality is like. I'm not sure, much about him at all. So I asked Jair, what should we know about him? And Jair said, well, he really cares. And then Jair told me, so they had Family Fest here, I believe it was Saturday night, and Jordan, the offense did not play well. I don't know the exact stats, but it wasn't a good day for the offense.
Right.
And so Jair said afterwards in the locker room, he asked Jordan, how do you think you guys did? And Jair is pretty sassy and as a personality, and he was like, I knew how they did. I saw it. He was obviously there, right? So he knows that the offense didn't play well, but he wanted to know what Jordan would say. He wanted to know what Jordan's answer would be, because that was going to tell him a lot about who this quarterback is and how he views the game in his own game. And he said that Jordan was really upset about it and was frustrated and was in the cold tub or the hot tub or both, in one of the tubs, with film, watching film already. And he said that he and Jordan were the last people in the building there until about midnight. And I'm sure they probably finished around, 9, I would say. Like, I think it was at 6 or 7. So, they were there pretty late after this fan fest. And Jair said that really meant a lot to him to see that Jordan was, 1, not happy with the performance, and 2, willing to put in extra time already that night. And he's like, if he had, if he'd been okay with that, I would have had a problem. But he's like, his head is in the right place.
Yeah, the one thing that I think Matt LaFleur likes about what he sees so far, look, when Matt LaFleur walked into this job, it was going to be hard to coach Aaron Rodgers in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was going to do some different things on offense, and LaFleur gave me this example, which I thought was really, really good. He said, so Aaron Rodgers has probably the best cadence in recent NFL history, drawing people offside. Nobody does it better than he does, and all this. So he said, I don't want to tell him anything about that. It's perfect. But now he wants to take Jordan Love, and he wants to go strip it right down to the bare walls and teach him everything about the cadence. Mm-hmm. And he said, the reason why I think that's important is because I want everything to be built properly. I don't want to skip any steps. Yeah. So even though Jordan Love has done some work with the cadence before, now the work to do it perfectly, in the gospel of Matt LaFleur, begins in this off season, in this training camp. So I look at it and I say, let's look at where Jordan Love is right now. He's learning a lot of the mechanical things for the first time. Mm-hmm. He's learning how to say these monstrously long plays in the huddle, like every play, instead of just a few plays of practice, because he's the understudied Aaron Rodgers. And then he's doing it with 2 second-year wide receivers. A third wide receiver is going to play a lot, Jaden Reed, who's a rookie tight end. And so how in the world do you expect in that situation to hit the ground running? Right. In fact, if I were a Green Bay Packers opponent, I would really want to play you early. Yeah. Because I think that early is going to be a problem for this team. Mm-hmm. But I don't sense in talking to the brass or a couple of the leading players, I don't sense alarm bells going off about Jordan Love. We'll see how he plays. Yeah. But I think anybody, I'd never forget this. Aaron Rodgers gets drafted in 2005. And so at the time, I'm making trips through training camps, and I remember 05, 06, 07 coming to Green Bay, and Bob McGinn, who covered the Packers for so long, was kind of roasting Aaron Rodgers. He was not playing well. And I just said to myself, well, if Rodgers gets roasted, and let's think back to 92 when Brett Favre takes over, and he's getting killed for throwing all those interceptions. So, again, Jordan Love might not make it. I don't
Right.
know. But I think to make any value judgment very early with all of those situations in play, I think is probably wrong. I want to ask you one other question about this team. So I talked to several people here while I was here and said, you're sort of a unique team. You operate kind of as a continuum. When the expiration date is nearing the end, even on a Hall of Fame quarterback, he gone, and you go with the next guy. So what do you think of that? And what do you think players think of that?
I think it was the right move in this scenario because Aaron was so clearly just done.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't even know that it was really like a business choice. It was like just the logical, like, all right, like this isn't working personality wise. We're not meshing anymore. Like we've gotten what we can get out of this relationship and like this contract and this player. So it made sense from a business sense. And then also just from, just logically when you looked at the team. And so, as a player, I don't know what I would think of that. I would think like it just kind of shows you like, again, I think the players all are very aware that like no matter who you are, your time will come. I think they're all very aware of like the truth of the NFL, of the business side of the NFL. And I think they all learn that really early on in their careers. Like something or another will happen, whether it's a teammate, like all the Colts players right now witnessing what's happening with Jonathan Taylor, I'm sure, going through the same process in their minds. So I think I think they all already have a sense of that. But here, I think it's very clear. The other thing I will say is that about the Packers before we move on, they're not going to say it's a rebuilding year here, but I think it really is.
Oh, it is.
Obviously,
no question. Yeah.
And the one position that I think gives it away, aside from everything else, when you look at their backup quarterbacks right now, they just released Danny Etling, who was the only quarterback who had experience, aside from Jordan Love, in this quarterback room. And they drafted Sean Clifford, 5th round, I think, from Penn State. And then they have their third quarterback is Alex Magoo, who was the USFL MVP, which is actually a really cool signing to see someone kind of jump from an alternative league to the NFL. And he was previously in the NFL, so he's back in the NFL. But they don't have veteran if Jordan Love gets hurt, they have a rookie 5th rounder or a USFL MVP who has never played in an NFL game.
But I will say this, just my thought. I think they're going to pick up a veteran
you think so?
At some point.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was interesting listening to the press conference of Matt LaFleur today, and I forget how he worded it, but he basically said, this isn't the final roster.
Right, okay.
So everybody hang on.
Like
for a
relax,
minute.
yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know what they'll do. Here's the other thing I wanted to ask you. So you cover the NFL, you work on NFL stuff, except when you're sort of delving into the Simone Biles story.
Yeah.
Because you're sort of a gymnastics person. You covered her in Hoffman Estates, Illinois over the weekend. But tell me something that you're working on or you're on the verge of writing or you just recently have written that you think is really, really interesting and maybe a little bit of an untold story right now about the NFL. Tell me what interests you right now that you think is going to be a story this year.
I think there's a few things, but one of the things you actually already just mentioned which is cadences. Like I meant to write this last year and then I just never got around to it, but I have interviewed a lot of backup quarterbacks and their perspective on like how they have to sound exactly like the starter, with the cadence, like down to the rhythm and even the tone of voice that they use so that when they come into a game, they're not confusing the offensive line and causing penalties along the line. So that's something that I've been working on for like a year, but like not really because I kind of forgot about it. But I'm going to revive that soon. So that's something interesting. That's just like an inside the game thing.
But
that
you
don't
know
really
what
think about.
you know what you did that was really interesting. I thought was you did a lot of stuff with backup quarterbacks because you did a backup quarterback podcast.
Yeah.
Which was fun,
Which I need to. I don't know when my season 2 is going to be. Like I'm waiting for like more. Like planning at The Athletic, essentially, because I think we're going to turn it into more of a video component instead of
Yeah.
mostly a podcast. Because I think it could be really fun as like a mainly YouTube thing. So I haven't like planned out a second season, but I did interview Kendall Hinton, the Broncos wide receiver, practice squad wide receiver who had to play quarterback in 2020 when their entire quarterback room broke the COVID protocol and was put on the COVID list, which is just like an iconic moment in backup quarterback history, in my opinion. And I was like, he was like my dream guest, like. And it was so interesting to hear from him because he really thought, and I thought this was so honest and candid from him. I was like, did you think you were going to play well? Because he'd played in college.
Yeah.
He had been an
Wake
ACC
Forest,
quarterback.
right?
Yeah, Wake Forest. And he's like, yeah. He was like, yeah, I really.
And it was a debacle.
It was
a total
horrible.
debacle. Yeah.
It could not have,
but the reason it was a debacle is that he found out 10 minutes before the game, or 24 hours before the game.
He basically said after his first play, he realized his visions of grandeur died immediately.
Yeah.
He was like, it took one play for me to be like, oh no, like
this is bad.
This is not going to go well. 1 out of 9
or something.
Yeah, he was 1 for 9. Yeah. It was really bad.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So that's something that I've been working on that at some point I will finish.
Yeah.
And then I think like something else I'm just going to keep an eye on. I don't really have a specific angle with it right now, is just the gambling suspensions. Like that's obviously been big news this offseason.
You know, I'll tell you what I find interesting about that. I wrote this in Football Morning in America this week, that a general manager on this trip told me, he said, what really worries me is that I can tell you at some point a player is going to just give a tip to his uncle, might be a little down on his luck.
Yeah.
And who knows, will the uncle make $5,000? And
right.
And so people
and
will start.
That's a violation, technically.
Yeah, it is. People will start looking into it. Hey, what's his relationship? And, one of the things I think, and the NFL has done a good job of hiding exact ways that they can be on somebody's trail.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, listen, in the old days, it was hard to trace things like this, but it isn't a paper trail anymore. It's basically a virtual trail that the NFL can more easily chase and follow. So if I were a player, and especially because these apps are so easy to use, I had an interesting talk the other day with a player in the Atlanta training camp who basically said, listen, no, it was in Cleveland, who said essentially, he goes, why would you bet?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway? Maybe in the off season, if you want to bet, that's fine. But it's insane that you think that it's worth it to try to beat the rules.
Right.
When, in his mind, it was a great line. He goes, nobody's any good about gambling anyway.
Right.
So why would you think you can beat the system? And anyway, but I agree with you. Something is going to happen with a big player who shouldn't be doing this and stupidly does it because so many players think they're bulletproof. And
the one thing I learned from my reporting, which is, I think, a sign that there is going to be more of this, is that the way that I understand it is it's really initiated by the state. So states audit violations, and within their own like laws and regulations, like they have a lot of language about, athletes using sports betting apps. So like if a licensed operator like FanDuel like catches on that there's a player placing a bet or there's a bet coming from a place that's suspicious, they have an obligation to report it to the state. So when the state gets word of that, or when the state does their own audit, that is when the NFL gets involved with this. And the reason that's scary is because if a state hasn't done its own audit like this year, it doesn't mean they're not going to do it in like 2 months or next year. So if you're a player and you placed a bet last season from your facility and you now know, oh, that wasn't allowed, but you didn't really understand it at the time when you did it, because I think a lot of guys weren't clear on the policy, but now they definitely are.
Yeah.
You still could get busted for that, even though it happened like a year ago.
Right.
So it's like I don't know I don't know if there is a statute of limitations on this stuff, but it's kind of scary because it might be 2 years old and you might still get caught.
The weird thing about the NFL is that they can suspend guys for things they did before they signed an NFL contract.
Yeah.
And so, look, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but we definitely have not seen the last scandal with betting on football. Kalyn, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Peter.
Look forward to reading you during the year and learning a lot about the sport I cover from you.
Thanks, and it's great to be reunited.
All right.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.